Freddie, thank you so much for joining us today and your willingness to be our first person. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
There's so much for you to share with us in our short period of time. We'll just start right away, if that's okay. You told me, Freddie, that you had a happy childhood. Let's begin with you telling us about your childhood and what you know about your parents' life in the years before the Holocaust.
Yes, I did have a happy childhood. We lived somewhat of the outskirts of Vienna, but still in the city, still in the town. And strange as it may seem, behind the building was a cow shed with about 12 cows, and they had a store selling milk down. And I used to always go there and help with the cows and with the horse that he had. So this is in addition to the kids that I played with in the street. Mm-hmm. So altogether, I thought had everything.
Your father was a disabled veteran of the First World War.
Yes.
What do you know about his service?
I really don't know much. I know that he was in Italy, and what actually happened to him, why he was disabled, I don't know. He never talked about
mm-hmm.
it. He was always in good spirits, mm-hmm. and I spent a great deal of time with him, and he taught me a lot. Mm-hmm. And I suppose, if anything, he taught me how to live in adversities, because he never complained about anything.
You told me that you actually spent more time with your father than with your mother.
Yes.
Why was that?
Well, the business they had required a certain amount of contact outside, and so my mother did that. Mm. And my father carried it on in the house. Mm-hmm. So I spent a lot more time with him.
Your parents had a really interesting business. Tell us what their business was.
Yeah, it's before the days of credit cards, and when you can pay off sort of time payments in stores. It didn't exist. You had to pay the full amount if you wanted an article. Mm-hmm. And so the business that grew up and my father was involved with is that we had catalogs. People would come look through the catalog and say,
so they'd come to you to look at the catalog, yeah.
I want to buy sheets or anything. Mm-hmm. And so we would buy it and then give it to them, and they would pay off in time. The trouble was with that is that once the Nazis took over, the people thought there's no reason that they have to pay. So there was all the merchandise that had been given out, but nothing was coming back.
Because they felt they didn't have to pay now.
Yeah.
And speaking of once the Nazis came, as Hitler's influence grew, you told me that your friends began to join Nazi youth organizations.
Yeah, everybody seemed to be roped into this. At first, I was a little jealous because they seemed to be having such a great time. Mm-hmm. But then gradually, they distanced themselves from me and shunned me. And then afterwards, it became abusive. Mm-hmm. So it's just amazing how this propaganda and this hate can be manifested with kids, with everybody. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it was I was kicked out of my school,
You're kicked out of your school.
and I went to another school, which was a school for Jews, and that was much more pleasant. It was much further away from my home, but it was a better environment. And also the teacher we had, he had been a professor at the university, but lost his job because he was Jewish. So we had the benefit of a very highly trained person teaching us.
Freddie, you shared with me one of those abusive incidents that you experienced as a boy, and one that particularly I remember. You had a school satchel, and tell us about that.
Well, this was when I was still in my old school.
In your old school.
We used to cut through a little park to get there, and the kids came by. They ripped off that satchel from my shoulder and threw it onto the grass, and then just ran away laughing. So I went over to pick it up, and there was a policeman right there. He must have seen the whole thing. And it's funny, in Vienna, you couldn't tread on the grass in these parks. Very different to England, where the lawns are meant to be enjoyed and feel under your feet. But there, you couldn't do it. So he took down my name and address and gave me a dressing down. The Jewish kids have no respect for the beauty of the parks. And a few days later, we received a letter telling my mother to come to school. And the practice in Vienna was when an adult comes into the class, all the kids rise. So my mother came in and the kids stood up, and the teacher yelled, "Sit down, you don't have to stand up for her." More abusive kind of talk about how we don't know how to respect the beauty of Vienna. And anyway, after that...
So the kids didn't have to stand because your mother was Jewish?
Yes, because, yeah, exactly.
Freddie, one of the things that happened when you then went to the Jewish school, you became part of the Jewish boys' choir.
I used to sing in the choir in my synagogue, but that was torched and on Kristallnacht. I thought it was out. Just and there was a choir formed actually in the Jewish neighborhood in Vienna, and I was accepted in that choir. So we used to have choir practice a couple of times a week, and it was the Jewish answer to the Vienna Boys Choir, which is actually quite famous. And they planned that we were all going to have the sailor suits and all that kind of stuff. They were living in a dream world.
Right. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And shortly afterwards, I actually went to England with my sister.
Before we talk about going to England, you told me recently about a memory that only recently you recalled. You remember drawing a picture of a Nazi in a brown shirt, and that really upset your parents.
Yeah, but if that would have been seen by anybody, they could have been killed for it. So they threw it in the fire and told me never to do it again. I didn't understand that it was such a terrible thing to do, but I think they realized the gravity of it.
You mentioned a few moments ago, Freddie, Kristallnacht. That was November 9th through 10th, 1938.
Yeah.
The Nazis had already annexed Austria in 1938, even though the war itself didn't begin until 1939. On the night of Kristallnacht, terrible things happened to Jews throughout Germany and Austria. What do you remember of Kristallnacht?
Well, I remember my sister's friend their parents had a store in the main street. It was a nice store, and it was smashed, looted, and the father was taken off and sent to Buchenwald. And I know that the street we lived in, there were no Jews, so there were no situations happening there. But I could see in the streets where there was stores and where Jews owned them, the devastation there.
And hundreds of synagogues were burned.
Yeah.
Freddie, and it wasn't long after Kristallnacht that your parents made this profound decision to send you and your sister on the Kindertrasnport.
Yeah, I think an important thing is to note that after Kristallnacht, the prominent people in England, Jews and non-Jews, and especially the Quakers were very vocal, appealed to the government to do something.
To the British government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at least save the children. And the Parliament debated it, and the Jewish refugees question, and on the same day they came up with the decision that they would accept children up to the age of 17 and who come unaccompanied. And so that was the beginning of the Kindertrasnport. And just a month later, the first transport came. And of course, when war broke out, 3rd of September 39, that stopped.
That stopped.
But by that time, about 10,000 children had come to England.
Including you and your sister. Trying to imagine your parents making that decision to, we're going to put you on a train and send you to England. You mentioned to me that you thought one of the things that might have helped them make their decision was because a cousin had gone to Palestine earlier, that they'd already seen one of the young members of the family go. Is that right?
Yeah, there were a lot of people leaving, going elsewhere, and especially to Palestine. But we knew to whom we were going.
You did know that.
Because in England, the former Prime Minister, Stanley Earl Baldwin, made an impassioned appeal over the radio, asking people to open their doors and their hearts to take in children. And Griggs, the people we went to, answered that call. And so when we found out that we were going, we knew we were going to this family who also had 2 children, similar ages to us. And my parents made it in a sort of an adventure. Mr. Griggs, my God, he was a locomotive driver. And so they said, you know, all kids, you were very interested in locomotives, and so...
You like trains, and so you're going to like being there.
So he made it into sort of an adventure, and said that we'll be together again soon afterwards. And so it wasn't not so difficult leaving, with the expectations of nice place to go, and we'll be again together soon.
It wouldn't last that long. I want to ask you, Freddie, to tell us, we had a photograph of you with your family taken in your backyard just before you left. Will you say a little bit about that photograph for us?
Well, my dad, he was an amateur photographer, so he took the photo, and that was the same day, the afternoon that we left. And I think it's a sad picture. There are no smiles.
Right.
And it was the last picture that we have.
And you shared with me that he wrote on the back of the photograph, the farewell.
Yeah, in Germany wrote the Abschied, which means the farewell.
So you went to the train station, I believe with your mother. Your father wasn't with you. You went to the train station. Tell us what you remember about leaving.
Well, we were standing by the open window and kind of holding hands and not knowing what to say.
Right.
And suddenly my school teacher was there. He knew I was leaving, but he was there with his 5-year-old son under his arm. And he asked if his son could sit with us and look after him until we get to London, where somebody will come and pick him up. So all of a sudden I had responsibility and a job. But then
So
when
he just handed you his child and said, yeah.
And the whistle blew and the train took off, and my mom tried to run along for a little bit, but very soon she was just a small figure at the end of the platform.
Freddie, did your parents try to leave Austria?
I don't know if they did or not, but it was pretty impossible because, first of all, my dad was injured, or he could only walk with the aid of 2 canes. Right. He didn't have a kind of profession that was easily transferable. We had no money to speak of, and didn't know English or any other language. So their chances of going anywhere were very slim.
You arrived with Ruth in June 1939. What happened once you got to London? You arrived there.
Well, we met the Greeks family, and they seemed very nice. And the following Monday morning, I was enrolled in school there.
In an English school?
I didn't know any English, but there I was. And but they were very kind. They took me immediately to a storeroom where they had gas masks and gave me a gas mask and fitted it and all that sort of thing. And to me, that was a very important sign, because in Vienna, there were a lot of people walking around with gas masks, but Jews didn't get gas masks because they didn't matter. So this was kind of an important thing, that in this country, even I matter.
That they gave you, that you mattered enough to give you a gas mask. Wow. Once you left Vienna, did your parents know anything about what was happening to you? Were you able to be in touch with them?
Yeah, we get a lot of letters until outbreak of war, then the letters stop.
And that was just a few months later.
Yeah. But then we occasionally got a letter through a cousin of mine who was in Switzerland, and so they wrote to him and he forwarded it on to us. And so we got a little thing. But then I think it was before 1942, we got a Red Cross card with 25 words, and that was it. And that was the last communication.
And that was from the Red Cross?
Yeah. And it was, I know from research here at the museum, that they were deported in 2nd of June 1942 to Minsk, and they were murdered there.
Freddie, once in London, you and Ruth went to the home of the Griggs, and he was a locomotive engineer. But you weren't with them very long because of the war.
Yeah.
You were evacuated.
Yeah, England had a very intense kind of program. As soon as the war broke out, thousands and thousands of kids from the London schools were evacuated to the country, and they had it all figured out. We went to a little place, and the Women's Voluntary Service had a list of the houses, and just deposited kids as we went along, and came to one house, and they were the two of us kids.
You were deposited at that house.
But the woman really didn't want us because, well, first of all, she was fairly young. She was, I think, in her 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the person who took us out, she told us that, well, these are not just evacuees from London, they're Jewish refugees from Austria. She bristled and she said, I don't much care for Jews, and was really reluctant to accept us. But she said, well, the woman that took us there, she said, well, if you don't want them, you can have a family come from England, from London, or a couple of soldiers from an army camp near there. So she looked at these options and decided that she'll accept us. But it was not a happy household.
No, and I know that was a very difficult time. Will you tell us a little bit about what that was like? Here you and your sister are sent out to a strange new place in the countryside. She doesn't want you.
I was not allowed in the house except when it's time to go to bed or mealtime. I had to be out the rest of the time.
Rain or shine.
Yeah, there was a shopping center near us, and I used to shelter in the entrance there and ask people the time so I wouldn't be late. But the strange thing is I was never sick, and I was there for 3.5 years. But I had
3.5 years.
I had a lot of friends in school, and we were asked from the school to volunteer for potato picking at a farm that was close by. And I volunteered for that, and I got very friendly with the farmer and the family. They used to invite me, and in fact they invited me for Christmas dinner. So, with all that, I had friends. It wasn't as if I was cowering down in some corner.
Right.
I used to play with them, and the only time when it was bad was when the weather was bad and nobody was out.
And you had to be outside.
Yeah.
Where was your sister at that time?
She went to a different school, which was a high school for, I don't know, where they teach home economics.
Home economics.
And so she was there, but she went back to London after being there for about 1.5 years because Mrs. Griggs died, and so Ruth, my sister, went back there to keep house. She was only 16, 17, and she had to do washing, cooking, and everything. And somehow she managed that. So she went there.
And you, at age 14, you returned to London at age 14 and started looking for a job.
Yeah.
Why did you have to look for a job?
And at that time, school leaving age was 14, unless you were enrolled in a private high school or some other place. So as soon as I turned 14, they didn't wait until the end of the school year. Your birthday and you were out. Mm-hmm. And it was understood that obviously that if you leave school, that you have to get a job and start working. I don't think there was any question about that. And my guardian was talking to his brother, both staunch union guys. Where should I work? What kind of job? Well, it boiled down, they thought that newspapers and printing was a good profession. So the next morning I went down to Fleet Street in London. It's the news capital of the world, kind of. All the newspapers have their offices there. And I was standing outside the Daily Telegraph, and a boy came and stood right next to me. He was in a page boy kind of uniform, had one of those pillbox hats on, and I could just read Telegraph on the side. So I said, "What's it like working for the Telegraph?"
Which was a major English newspaper.
Yeah. He said, "Oh, it's a great company. Are you looking for a job?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, the head office isn't here. It's in about 10 minutes away from there, Cannon Street." So I fell into step with him and went with him.
Fred, I know that you have such a wonderful story about that job, and I'm gonna do a short version of it if it's okay, because we've got so many more things for you to talk about. But you mistakenly thought he worked for the newspaper, the Telegraph, and in fact you ended up way out in the countryside at a little factory producing telegrams that went for races, right? Something like that?
No. It turns out that the company was the Exchange Telegraph.
The company was Exchange Telegraph.
Yeah, and I just focused on the word telegraph. I didn't realize it was something else. And they printed financial statements of various corporations. Yep. And had a mailing on that. So the printing that was done were these statements. Yeah. And it was very good because I did get a job there, and we were in Tring in the country, again about 20, 30 miles out of London. And I learned the process of lithographic printing. These were all American machines they had there. And it was interesting. And it was like an extended family there. It was really a wonderful experience.
You had a place to live?
I had a place to live. They had a cook in the village hall, provided breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There was a badminton court. I learned to play badminton. And
you're 14 years old when you started that.
Yeah.
You were just 16 when the war ended in 1945. Once the war was over, what did you and Ruth do?
Well, the country moved back to London and had a place in Leicester Square. And so I continued working there. But then my guardian retired, and
That was Mr. Griggs. He
Yes.
retired because Mrs. Griggs had died. as
she
you
had
mentioned,
already
yeah.
died. And all the years he was on the footplate of these engines, he was okay. As soon as he retired, he became sick and died. Now there were his children and myself and my sister. We had to find some place. His children went with one of their relatives, and we didn't have anywhere, but through a contact of my sister's, they found a place for us to go to Manchester, where we could start up again. And we did that. And for the first time since I was in England, I came in touch with the Jewish community.
Because you had had no contact with the Jewish
No,
community.
in London I had absolutely no contact.
And certainly none in this little community you were in the country, yeah.
So it was very nice, and there were youth movements there, some Zionist youth movements that I joined, and I very soon had a full life. And I had a job with a company that had the kind of machinery that I was using with the Exchange Telegraph, so I could use my skills there.
Going forward a couple of years later, after you were at age 18, before I get there, you were able to obtain British citizenship. Tell us about that.
Well, and that was another nice gesture by Britain. They knew they had thousands of kids, or no longer kids, but young adult, who had no citizenship and had lost their families. So they offered us citizenship. All we had to do was go to an office and sign, and that was it. Got a certificate of citizenship. I could get a passport and travel and do whatever I want. Had no longer an enemy alien. I was now a fully blown citizen.
Yep.
And in the case of a boy, it meant when you're 18, you get called up for the military, which is something I actually looked forward to, because all my friends who were older had gone in, and I wanted to do that too. So, true enough, when I turned 18, I got called for the selective services, go and have a medical and some tests and all that, which all came out fine. I was A1, and you'll be notified shortly where to report. And this happened to be in May 1948, and the 15th of May, Israel was created and immediately attacked by surrounding countries. And I thought to myself, I ought to be going there, not in the British Army, but in the Israeli Army. So I made inquiries, and there were kind of a clandestine route to get there, and I eventually got there.
I know we don't have time for it, but that clandestine route, I remember you telling me about this Israeli man who recruited you in London, and he wrote something on the side of a newspaper, and you had to hide it in a bag of sweets on how to get out. And you make it to Israel. So tell us about that. So you went there to serve in the Israeli army.
Yeah. Well, I got there, and went to, actually, when they decided what to do with me, they sent me to a place where they had workshops. They had received batches of walkie-talkies and all this kind of surplus stuff, but much of it wasn't working. And I had some experience in radio repair. So I was in a workshop there and they're testing them and making them work. So I don't have any heroic battles to talk about. I was just in that workshop, and that was it. Now, at the end of '49, when there was an armistice, I was discharged, and they wanted to, liked the idea if we would go and join a kibbutz or something like that, which I didn't want to do. And I was just standing outside the office there when a guy came walking down to a New in England. And I stopped to chat and asked him what he's doing, and he said he's a radio operator and he works for the Zim lines. And he said he's having a wonderful time, he loves it and all that. So I decided there and then that's going to be my future. But I had to go back to England because I had an obligation. So I went back.
Because you were still to be drafted over there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So as soon as I actually came with a boat from Ostend to Dover. As soon as I arrived there, they looked up some foreman and said, "You know you're wanted by the army?" I said, "Yes, I know." And they said, "That's why I'm here." So they said, "Well, as soon as you got home, report to the police and they'll take it from there." And I did that. And a couple of weeks later, I was in Catterick, a camp in Yorkshire. And I spent 2 years in the army, most of the time in Germany. And I was eventually a tank commander. And I felt very good. I enjoyed my army service.
In the British Army.
Yeah.
And then after you were discharged from the British Army, you then attended a merchant Navy college, became a radio officer at sea, which led to meeting Josie Ann. Tell us before we turn to our audience for some questions, tell us what happened once you became a radio officer.
Well, at first I didn't get any reply from the Israeli shipping line. So I took a job on British ships, and then somebody told me that on the ships that fly for a flag of convenience, Panamanian, Liberian, they pay very well. But the downside of it, you don't know who's there and all that. Anyway, it was strange enough. A few days later, somebody called me on my radio. They must have heard me working. They had my call sign. So I answered. And he said, "Do you have the weather report?" So I said, "Yes." He said, "Can you send it to me?" I said, "Yes." And we went to work in frequency, and I sent to him. He was very grateful. And then he told me that he's on a Panamanian ship heading for Immingham. Exactly, it's the same port we were on our way to also. And then he said, "I'm signing off when I get there. Are you interested in a job here?" I said, "I might be." So it turned out that when we got to Immingham, I saw the ship there. I walked over there, and the steward saw me, and said, the captain's expecting you. And I went up there, and the captain was Captain Evans. He was British. The second mate was English, so was the third mate. It wasn't anything like somebody warned me about. They seemed to be a really nice crew. And then he said, well, what kind of salary are you thinking of? So I tripled my salary. and I said that to him, and he said, oh, I don't think that will be a problem. And so I signed off, and then had a few days leave, and then went and joined the Cornerstone. And I was on it for about almost a year, until we came back to Liverpool. And when we got back, I signed off, and it was paid off. And there was more money there than I'd ever seen in my life. So it was very good, because I wanted to continue my studies to become Chief Radio Officer. And there was a new course of radar for radio officers. And so I wanted to go on that too. So I had time to take all these courses. And then I wrote again to the Israeli company. And this time they said, come to London, somebody will be there to interview you. And I did that, and he hired me to go to Hamburg and join the SS Zion.
And it was on one of those journeys on the SS Zion that you met Josiane.
That's right.
And then later you married on the SS Zion, right?
Yeah, the funny part was I was supposed to be only for one trip to Haifa, because a lot of the guys want to be on this new ship, and they had seniorities. But as we were going through the Bay of Biscay, it was foggy and bad sea, and the radio broke. And they called me and said, can you do something? And as luck would have it, I managed to trace the problem and find it and repair it. And the captain was delighted. And he was taking a brand new ship through a heavy traffic shipping lane, blind. And so this radar gave him sight. And he said to me, do you want to remain on this ship? So I said, you bet I do. So I was like a piece of furniture on that ship. People came and went, and I was untouchable. I was there for 4 years.
In fact, you actually have written a book about your seafaring days as a merchant seaman.
Yeah.
Freddie, couple other questions. One is, I know it's really difficult to talk about your parents, and you mentioned earlier that one of the things that you got from your father was how to deal with adversity. But you've also shared with me that you feel, and we've heard it in what you've said, you had sort of a self-confidence, like, well, yeah, I'll do that. Tell us about what else you think you got from your father.
Confidence, as you said, maybe it was good and maybe it was stupid, because I used to tackle things that most people don't tackle, like building an in-ground pool, because I bought a kit, and it was 16 by 32, and people thought, this is crazy, what you do? But I had a guy with a backhoe dig up, make a hole for the pool, and I finished it up, and I actually had a very beautiful pool. It was very nice. And then later on, when we went to our house where we're living now, I wanted to build an addition. So again, I designed it, drew up the plans, and had it okayed. and I had somebody build what do you call it? A shell.
A shell. Mm-hmm.
And so from the outside it looked as if it was finished, but from inside, electrical and insulation and drywall and floor and ceiling, I did all that.
And you had said your father, despite his disability and the things he'd gone through, could do almost anything.
Yeah.
And you have approached your whole life that way, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Freddie, if you don't mind, there's so many other things I'd like to ask you about, but why don't we turn to our audience and ask if they have any questions they want to ask. We have a few minutes for that. We have microphones in both aisles. I'd like to ask you to all stay with us through the next few minutes because Freddie will close our program, and I want you to be here for that if at all possible. But if you have a question, we do ask that you use the mic. Make your question as brief as you can. I'll repeat it as best I can just to make sure we get it right before Freddie answers it. So if you have a question, and if nobody has one, I'll continue on. But would you have anybody with a question? We got two in the front row. Go to the mics, yeah. Sir, if you want to go to this one, yep.
First of all, thank you so much for doing this and for continuing to increase awareness all over the world. Thank you so much, Freddie. What happened to your sister during all this time?
The question is, what happened to your sister? What happened to Ruth?
Oh, she married after we moved to Manchester. She met a nice guy, and about a year later they married, and they went to live in Israel, and where they have two boys. The youngest one actually was killed during the 73 war, and the other one is still living there, and he's got two children, got a very nice family. But my brother-in-law died in 74, and my sister died in 2000. But otherwise, before, they had a nice life there.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, sir.
Freddie, I wanted to thank you again for sharing your story with us. I walked through the whole museum, and there seems to be certain milestones which led us to the Holocaust. Do you see certain milestones happening since then that could possibly bring us to another, maybe not something as horrific as this, but to a big, huge problem like this?
The question is, do you see milestones that could lead, that are taking us in a direction of worrying about another Holocaust?
Yes.
I think what we do want to do is avoid getting into any political discussion here, but if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, there was a honeymoon after the war, a few years, where Israeli ship went anywhere and people were really welcoming us. Well, maybe they still do that, but the fact is anti-Semitism has risen, especially in places like Denmark and Sweden and quite a lot of places. And so the thing is, the hatred seems to persist. But I think it's important for governments and the people in charge to make sure that this doesn't get out of hand. But it's unfortunate that it is not something that is finished and just in history.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One last question from me. You stayed, even though Mr. and Mrs. Griggs died early, you did stay in contact with the Griggs family.
Oh, yeah. Yes, they came to visit us here, and we went for quite a few times to England and saw them there. So we had contact up to the last minute. but they have also died. That's one of the problems of getting old.
True. I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. To remind you that we'll have a first-person program each Wednesday and Thursday until the middle of August, so we hope that you might have the chance to come back. Our programs are on the museum's YouTube, on the website on YouTube, so you can see our programs on there, and we encourage you to do that if you can. When Freddie finishes in just a moment, two things. One is our photographer, Joel, who's right here, is going to come up on the stage and take a photo of Freddie with you as the background. So that's one of the reasons I want you to stay, if you will do that. And then secondly, because we had such a short period for questions, Freddie will remain on the stage up here, and we welcome you. I really genuinely mean this. We welcome you to come up here, meet him, shake his hand, get a photograph taken with him, or ask that question if you have one on your mind. So please take advantage of that if you can. It's our tradition at First Person that our first person has the last word. And so on that note, I'll turn to Freddie to close our program.
Well, as I've stated, one person can make a difference. And in the case with Mr. Griggs, when they took us in, it made a difference. And I think people should always think it doesn't have to be someone else. They can do something and they can make a difference. And I value that. And I think, of course, I'm alive because of it. And I think that's something to remember.